Day two of Code here, and it's fascinating that at this tech conference, two of the biggest highlights yesterday were the CEOs of a bank and an airline. David Solomon of Goldman Sachs, of course, we talked to him yesterday afternoon. He commented on the president's use of tariffs as a non-economic tool, talked about the way equities are relying on a rate cut and what might happen. That Goldman says there will be no cut this year. And Jim, we did talk about that Apple credit card, and he addressed concerns among some who say building the infrastructure for a credit card is harder than they think.
It's not an easy thing to do, and we've been working at it for quite some time, but we're excited about the platform we've built and our partnership with Apple. It's in beta right now. There are some employees at Goldman Sachs and some employees at Apple that are using the card. I'm using the card. I like the way it looks. I like the simplicity, the lack of friction when it comes to paying bills, looking at what you've spent, ease of use. And so I think it's going to be well received. The early feedback indicates that there'll be a lot of interest in it when we finally do launch it later this summer.
All right, so it's in beta, Jim. Launch later this summer. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then there was Ed Bastian, guys, of Delta Airlines. Big technology play, he argues. They're investing in biometrics so you don't have to show papers as you board a flight. Investing in RFID so you can track your bag, see when it gets to baggage claim, when you arrive. But did say that they're cautious on international, specifically Pacific, as tourism to the United States is showing some warning signs.
I think trade is part of that. I think certainly, the warnings, the travel warnings that have been going out have been part of it. And I think people, when you look at us, I mean, we're not as welcoming an environment for the international traveler as we could be. But currency is also playing part of that, too. It's more expensive to come to the U.S. with the strength of the dollar.
Not as welcoming an environment for the international traveler and, of course, currency. So, Jim, Sarah, Wilf, I mean, we've seen that dynamic play out through a number of individual names, the Tiffany's of the world. But to hear Delta say it, we'll keep a close eye on that as we get into the summer.
Well, Carl, these were both great news-making interviews, and I know that the airlines just have been woeful in terms of investing. I listened close and parsed every word you had with Solomon because it was such an important interview. The issue that I think Solomon is missing is not the demand side, whether people will like it, because he likes it. It's the over-demand side. I think the love of Apple is so great that it will overwhelm what Goldman wants to do, and they're going to have to build 4 or 5 centers just to be able to handle the credit card. And the idea that you can take the credit card and not necessarily have the right risk profile, that's another thing that Goldman's going to have. So the issue is them being overwhelmed by demand, not that there may not be enough demand. And that is what's going to tax Goldman Sachs, I think.
Right. I know you're more worried about the infrastructure of fintech. Wilf, I mean, if Goldman were here now, they'd argue a third of our staff as engineers were more than equipped to handle the flood of demand.
They also would argue that they're the best at risk management and they can handle whether or not they're extending credit or not. I think the interesting thing on this is that Apple probably cut quite a tough bargain on the margin that Goldman Sachs is going to get on this. I don't think it's going to be immediately incremental to their returns and their profitability. The question is, a year or two down the line, whether there's some cross-selling opportunity for them. Apple customers are wealthy customers. Goldman Sachs is building out an online-only bank, and it wants to attract some more people to their private wealth management platform. Whether there's some kind of cross-selling opportunity in that down the line could be attractive. The other thing I'd just say quickly as well, more broadly about this.
Yes.
When David Solomon was battling Harvey Schwartz to get the job, you had an operator in Harvey Schwartz, and you had a guy that was known for being loved across the S&P 500 companies and having great relationships. And people said, can David Solomon take those relationships that he's built as an investment banker and build out other parts of the business? This is an example of that. And the question is, does it really deliver to the bottom line in the next couple of years?
Well, look, I think they do have to get further. I do know that even when I was there in the 80s, you're supposed to find no clients under 10 million.
Right.
But let me just ask you, I know we got to move on. What the hell does Tim Cook want to do with the name Marcus? Does he need Marcus? Doesn't he like Apple more than Marcus? I think Apple has more recognition.
Well, the credit card says Apple and Goldman Sachs. They didn't use Marcus for the credit card.
That?
Well, I think you raised the right question, and I think they've
bye-bye
Marcus.
All right, bye-bye Marcus.